Welcome to the Financial Fun Podcast with your host, Tammy Johnston. This is where Tammy talks with business owner parents and grandparents about the interesting and important subject of money. We promise this to be an interesting and open discussion, as that's how we learn best. And now, here's your host, author of the Financial Foundations. Financial Foundations is a series of books to teach kids about money, goal setting, and living a balanced life. Find out more at financialfun.ca. Here's Tammy Johnston.
First things first, I would like to thank all of my listeners that have subscribed and reviewed my podcast and invite you to subscribe and review if you haven't yet. I appreciate you helping us to get the word out and making financial literacy a safe and welcoming subject for kids and adults. Second, please check out my podcast website, financialfun.ca, where you will be able to access past shows, find out more about me and our guests, as well as purchase the beautifully illustrated Financial Foundations books that teach kids about money in a fun, healthy, and holistic way. Hello, and thank you once again for joining us for the Financial Fun Podcast. Today our guest is somebody I love dearly, and I am so very fortunate to have her in my world. The lovely and talented Yvonne Basten. Thank you for joining us, Yvonne.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Tammy. I'm very excited to be here with you today.
So, Yvonne, tell us, what is your business? What do you do?
Well, as a true entrepreneur, I do a couple of different things. I run a eWomen network chapter here in Calgary. eWomen Network is a North America-wide networking organization for women entrepreneurs, and I've been doing that for the last 5 years, and still going strong with that. And then I also started a new venture. I am a guide for women, supporting them in both life and business. I take them on either a 6 months or a 1 year journey. And I'm, sometimes it will be helping them get unstuck. If they feel stuck, sometimes it's, dealing with some old trauma that actually keeps them stuck without them realizing that that's what's happening. So it's a wonderful, I'm still kind of discovering what exactly direction it's going to go in, but, that's definitely what my future path will be.
Well, that's part of the joy of entrepreneurship, because very few people end up where they thought they were going to be when they started, because the path changes and different things open up and you discover you don't like certain things, you like other things better, and it's never dull.
It sure is not. And yeah, I totally agree. I see that a lot, of course, through my work within the eWomen Network organization. And it's just buckle up and then enjoy the ride, I always say. So
I've had to teach many people that success is learning to surf the chaos.
Yes. Very true.
And what is your family situation, Yvonne?
I'm divorced and have been divorced for quite a few years now, since 2005. And I have 2 sons with my former husband. Freddie is almost 28. He'll be 28 in a few weeks. And my youngest son will be following with a birthday in August, about 2 weeks later, and he'll be 26 this year. And his name is Rob.
And you're not originally from Canada, are you?
No, I was actually born and raised in the Netherlands. So, yeah, and then my former husband was in the oil industry, so we lived and traveled around in different countries and places around the world, and in the end decided to immigrate to Canada in 2000.
So you've had the pleasure of living in and experiencing different cultures all over the place.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, for sure. We lived in, I started out in Paris in 1988. My oldest son, Freddie, was born there towards the end of our journey there. We were only there for about a year. And then I actually went home back to the Netherlands for a few months, while my then husband went to our next destination and kind of got that ready for us, because there was a fair amount of stuff that needed to be done to the house in Nigeria. So we lived in Nigeria for 4 years, and then from there we went back to the Netherlands for about 2.5 years, moved 3 times within that time span. And then we went to a pretty sudden move to Norway, Stavanger, and I literally had 2 weeks to get everything ready to move. And so that was quite a challenge, but we did it. I had a girlfriend at the time who really, really helped me out, and I don't think I could have done it without her, because during those 2 weeks I also got this really nasty flu, bug, whatever it was, and then my youngest one got it as well, and I was so sick. And what happened then actually was that I'd gone to the doctor and I said, to the doctor, I have to have drugs. Give me something.
Yeah.
And I was just not, started taking a certain kind of antibiotics, and I was taking it, and nothing was changing. But I just kept taking it, and it wasn't until I actually, woke up once I had moved to Norway and I woke up the next day in my hotel that I was like, all right, this is not making sense. I've been on these drugs now for like a week almost, and I'm still feeling like horrible. What if the drugs are not working, or if I'm allergic to the drugs or whatever? And I literally cold turkey stopped with them, and I instantly almost felt better. So,
hey, well, if that's going to happen, that's a good thing. So, with you living in different countries and having to raise children in all these different countries and stuff, what were some of the things that you noticed were different about how the different cultures handled and talked about money?
Well, when we were in Nigeria, and I think people, even Nigerians will totally agree with me on this, the money was really dirty. It's literally, the money makes you feel icky.
Oh.
It's worth nothing for starters. And, I think that, even got worse, since we left. But it was kind of this known little fact that women, that would sell, their wares on the streets at the markets and stuff like that, they oftentimes would kind of safekeep, their money in unusual places.
Oh.
And I'm not saying in the upper body area.
Oh. Very unique. I'm kind of glad, I don't think of my, like a change purse, but.
So that was one of those things where, I anytime I touched money there, literally, I had to wash my hands, and always had, stuff with me to make sure that I could, clean my hands before, doing anything else. So, but yeah, so that was a country where you would have, big wads of money with you, and really didn't have money with you, if you know what I mean, right? Like, it was just, like how Italy used to be way back in the day, where before the euro, when they had the lira, and the lira wasn't worth anything. So you had like 100,000 lira on you that was like worth $10 kind of thing. So, Nigeria was kind of the same in that sense.
So if the money didn't have much value there, and yes, there's definitely some economies around the world, like I just think of Zimbabwe, that was dealing with like inflation in the hundreds of millions. Like, it was just ridiculous. How did they work around that? Like, so how did people get the goods and services they need if the money was basically worthless?
Like, they literally just carried around a lot of money, and they just don't, like the stuff is valued differently too, right? When stuff is, when you have such a discrepancy between the whole currency issue, but people would just, carry boatloads of money with them when they would go even just grocery shopping. They weren't buying a TV. They were just going in for a loaf of bread, but they had to, basically carry a U-Haul behind them to pay for it.
Did you find in Nigeria that like the barter economy was a lot stronger because of things like that?
Oh, yes. Yeah, that's, you wouldn't outright, unless you were in a grocery store, but if you were to go to any of the markets and stuff like that, you would barter constantly. Like, you would never buy anything for face value.
Yep. And was there a lot of like trading? Like, you give me a pig and I'll give you like 6 chickens or whatever it would be?
That may have happened in other areas, more in the rural areas, but I was in the big city in Lagos, so that was not. No, you would actually, if you wanted something, you had to actually pay for it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And so other than Nigeria, what were some of the other differences? Because you lived in a few different countries and raising kids.
Well, we were in Singapore the last 2 years before moving to Canada. So we moved to Canada in 2000, and the 2 years prior to that, we were in Singapore. So totally different economy, right? Like over there, everything, and in Norway as well, everything is very expensive. Definitely in Norway, like when you go to a grocery store, at one time, I went to the grocery store and I'd actually been thinking about dinner, what to have for dinner. And I was like, I'm really craving Wiener Schnitzels. And I went, I was in the store and looked around in the meat department, and lo and behold, they had a little package, 2 little schnitzels, and they were like, back in the day, in those days I was still converting often, because I only lived in Norway for 4 months. So it was in that 4 months time. Well, we were supposed to be there for a couple of years, but then after 3.5 months, he came home and said, "You're not going to like what I have to say," which was kind of code for "we're moving."
Yeah.
And, so it was in that 4 months time span that I did this purchase. And when I would just arrive somewhere, I would still play the conversion game. At one point you give up. You don't do that. You just buy whatever you need and don't really worry about what it actually costs.
So it doesn't drive you crazy.
Yeah. So you don't go bananas. Definitely in when you live in economies where something is like, can be potentially super expensive. So I literally paid $25 for 2 schnitzels.
Oh my.
I know. And I was just, I really didn't care because I was too lazy to make them myself. And I was really craving them. And I was like, well, what the heck, and the kids were still a lot younger back then. So, you just grab it. And they were not huge eaters. So I was like, well, and they were not that big either. So I was like, well, we can make this work. We can stretch this a little bit. And at least I can get my little schnitzel, kick. Yep. But yeah, Singapore, for instance, is a super, super expensive place. It's gorgeous. It's beautiful. I loved living there. I would go back in a heartbeat. And it's, for local people, it's, they have to succeed in life in order to be able to, have a decent living. Because, it was nothing for a fairly simple condo to have, if you were to purchase the condo, having to put down like $1 million. And the Singapore dollar is actually quite equivalent to the Canadian dollar. So that's a lot of money for, a relatively simple condo. Cars, vehicles were incredibly expensive there. People would pay hundreds and thousands of dollars for like a Mercedes or something like that. Like way more expensive than here.
And with the boys going through all these different places and stuff like that, did they ever mention anything to you or ask questions about the differences?
When we were in Nigeria, they were still fairly little because my oldest one started living there. He was only a few months old and he was about just over 4 years old when we left. And I never really had them touch the money or anything like that,
I wonder why.
Yeah, like I said before, it still gives me the heebie-jeebies just to even think about it. But then when when we changed countries, when we went, for instance, to even in Norway when they were a little older and stuff like that. So I was able to, you start showing them the different currencies and, they, because they now had lived before we went to, Norway, we had lived in the Netherlands for a little while. So, they knew that, and back then that was still the guilder as well. It wasn't the euro, that came afterwards. And so, they could tell, the difference between one currency and the other. And I would tell them when we were living in, both in Singapore and in Norway, we wouldn't have endless discussions around money, but we would have, I would say, like this is compared to other places in the world, this is a really expensive country. And we don't just run out and buy stuff, for instance, in Nigeria, you could just run out and buy stuff because stuff was just so cheap because the money wasn't worth anything. But when you live in places like Norway and Singapore, you're more mindful when you purchase stuff, kind of thing.
Okay. And were you living in Europe at all when the euro came in?
No, I don't think so. I can't remember where I was living at the time that it changed, but I was definitely not there when it changed, because it was like it wasn't until I traveled to the Netherlands that I got introduced to the euro. I was definitely living overseas. I would have to look up which year they changed, and I would be able to tell where I was. Yeah. But it changed while I was away.
And what were some of the biggest changes in terms of like the money and the culture around money that you discovered when you moved to our beautiful, beautiful Canada?
Well, it's colorful and pretty.
And that's just the people. What about the country?
The country is, it's amazing. Like coming from, even in Singapore, where the country is the city is the country kind of thing, right? Like it's not very big. And
they got a lot more people than we do.
And a lot more people. And the same for the Netherlands, right? Like the Netherlands fits in between Calgary and Edmonton, north, south, and then east, west, kind of a similar distance. With 17 million people living there. So, one of the first things that somebody that comes from a nation like that will notice is just the sheer, the size of the country, right? Like just even, driving around here in Alberta, and you could drive, for quite some time and not bump into anybody, and just the sheer distance. And
we measure everything by hours.
Yeah, well, that's so true. And if when I used to live in Paris, when we started living there, we were very aware that we were moving to Nigeria after the 1 year in Paris. So we took quite a few opportunities to, go back and forth between Paris and home. Because we knew that once we were in Africa, we wouldn't have that luxury. And it was literally 4 hours from door to door, from my mom's place in The Hague to our apartment in Paris. And, so you've left the Netherlands, you've driven all through Belgium and through the northern part of France, and that was 4 hours. Well, look what you can do here in 4 hours.
Yeah, my mother is 4.5 hours, basically straight north. And I have my brother, if I wanted to drive to see him, it would be 4 days driving. If I wanted to get no sleep whatsoever, you could do it in 3.
Wow. Yeah, that's hard to imagine for people, even if when I post sometimes something on Facebook and other people, family or friends in Europe will see those posts and they kind of go like, oh my God, like this is unreal. And I'm like, yeah, it's just, they think that everything is so much closer. And if I say, well, they say, well, yeah, Vancouver, that doesn't look that far on the map. I said, that's a 12-hour drive.
Yeah, and that if all traffic is good, you don't have any construction, you don't have any avalanches, no washouts.
And they we're in Africa, in 12 hours. So it's a totally different world, right? So.
Oh, yes, geographically. But like you said, thinking about money in the culture, is there anything that you noticed that was kind of unique or stood out to you when you moved over? We don't keep our money in interesting places like they do in Nigeria, but.
No, you don't. No, there was not a huge, there wasn't a huge difference in the sense of, when you look at, when I was in Nigeria, like I said, like I had money, like lots of money on me all the time when I would go grocery shopping, and that was an adventure on its own. And of course, if here it's similar to, some of the other more civilized places in the world where, you just have a couple of notes, in your wallet, and other than that, most of the stuff is done via debit or credit card kind of thing. So it's actually rare nowadays that I even carry cash on me. So it's, money wise, it's a, as a lot of other places in the world, it's just an easy, easily, how would you say that? Easy way of transaction, right? Like it's not, because at the time when I was living in Nigeria, I'm not too sure what it is now. But like things like debit card or credit card, you didn't have that over there, right? Like you would literally, it was a cash kind of, society. So, here you don't have that.
Well, I'm still floored. Like when I used to travel down to the States and I'd go down there and it's cash or credit. They're just starting to get into debit. And a lot of the time they still don't understand what that means. They're so far behind the rest of the world on that front.
Yeah, it's interesting. So for here, I just love the convenience of doing debit and credit, and the Netherlands is the same. Like debit in the Netherlands has been around for a long time. I want to say it's kind of similar to here, where checks are kind of a thing of the past. If I need to pay you for something, I do an e-transfer, and there's places on this planet where that would be like, what's that?
Yeah.
Like, you mean I'm not giving you 20 bills for this?
Yeah.
No. You just send me money online and
I'll accept it on my smartphone.
Yes. Yeah. So, so our society, when it comes to money and finances and stuff like that, it's all built on convenience, right?
Very, very, very much so. To finish up here, like I know your boys are adults and stuff like that. Well, adults. They're off on their own and finish university and stuff like that. But if you could make sure that they know 3 lessons about money, what 3 things would you want your boys to know?
It doesn't grow on trees. Save your money, or save/invest your money so that, it can grow, and don't, put it all in one spot.
Those are definitely some good lessons. So thank you so much for taking time out of your very busy day in order to chat with us.
You're so very welcome. It was my honor and pleasure.
All right. Have a good day, Yvonne.
You too.
Before we leave each other, I would ask all of you listening to please subscribe to and rate my podcast. A review would be most appreciated, and feedback is always welcome. Whether it be a comment, future topic suggestions, and or questions you or your kids would like to have answered in the Ask Tammy column on the financialfund.ca website. Please feel free to check me out on Facebook at Financial Foundation's Children's Books, on Twitter at Financial Fun, and Instagram at financial.fun.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Financial Fun Podcast. Join Tammy Johnston again next week. For more information, please visit financialfun.ca.